Today's talk is all about seeing the truth beyond the appearances. And I would say that it's one of the bigger topics in terms of our teaching and one of the many, many practices that we are called back into. That one of the greatest things that we can do as metaphysicians is to see and know beyond whatever our current circumstances are or what they might be. And personally, I would say it's one of the hardest things about our worldview sometimes, because it's not always the most popular way of thinking, right? It's to many, they look at us when we say, well, I'm going to know the truth beyond what the current condition is. They say, oh, well, you're just wishful thinking. That's just, you're not seeing reality for what it is. You're basically just involved in some airy fairiness thought that has no basis in reality. And I'm sure you can relate to that, right? So we are continually asked then as good students to return to what we know as beginner's mind. When faced with an obstacle or a challenge or a situation or even a question, we come back to the basics. It is always good to come back to the basics. That says that everything going on in the world as we see it right now, the effect is the activity of God. It is the activity of the divine. But despite the conditions of the world, we have within us this power to transform anything, by the power of our intention, our thought, our feeling, by our consciousness. And yes, I know, how could it be all God? Like, how could all that's happening in the world be God? It's inviting us into a bigger question. What we know as metaphysicians is that consciousness is cause, that consciousness is back of everything. So we invite ourselves to just start there, that consciousness is everywhere, it is everything, consciousness is cause. And so when people say, well, that is just so airy-fairy and unwise, that is why we continue to practice. It is a practice, it is a science. It is why we ask our students in our courses to experiment with our New Thought teachings and test for themselves the validity of how it is working in their lives. I can count so many times in my minister meetings as of late within the last 2 years here in the spiritual community I've been part of Amazing Grace. When I served there, we were constantly having to look at the condition, the pandemic, the senior minister's upcoming retirement, the unknowns about how it was going to happen, and also simultaneously continue to hold the high watch, to continue to know the truth with a capital T, that something powerful was unfolding, that there was a reason for all of this. And me coming into a new city, of course, I didn't expect any of this. None of us did. But it was, how do I hold the truth despite what is appearing before me? We don't get to know the reason sometimes in the midst of it. And so I have to say that my goal in every single talk that I give is to give and to create relevancy. That this teaching is not just some theory. It is not something that we just talk about. It's not an intellectual exercise. It is something that we want to practice and integrate and live. And it's something that I want to bring into the relevancy of our lives of, well, how does this teaching apply to my life? It's coming back to what I call a moral and spiritual imperative, which guides our policies and practices in all of our communities. It stands for social causes in a world where shared resources is the norm. Kindness and empathy exist in our dialogues. And so with all the shadow and the darkness in the world right now that we see, it's definitely difficult sometimes to see anything but the appearance, but the condition. But if consciousness is cause, then when things inside you start to shift, we always talk about how this is everything, the work that we do in consciousness is always an inside job. When things inside you start to shift, then the outside starts to shift, because the outside does not determine what happens. It's all a reflection of our internal consciousness, which is where that micro and that macro are paired together. So there is this kind of truth that we talk about of speaking truth to power by telling truths despite popular opinion. And then there is the kind of truth with the capital T that we know that is the foundation of our teaching when we pray, when we affirm, when we know for someone else the truth. It is the basis and the foundation of our prayer work, of our affirmative prayer, of our spiritual mind treatments, of knowing the truth despite the appearance and the condition. It is knowing wholeness despite disease or sickness. It is knowing calm and serenity despite depression and anxiety. It is knowing perfect guided action and trust when we feel helpless and in despair. But I think that sometimes, because we're so used to this way of operating and being in the world, I know I've been steeped in this teaching for 20 years. This nomenclature that all of us have come to understand and know often is not that familiar to other people in the world. I'm surprised sometimes when I hear friends of mine who aren't really versed in the jargon or the teaching itself. They go down this rabbit hole of negativity. And I forget that we are so steeped in this constant dialogue and the constant of self-introspection that sometimes we have to be reminded, and we get to remind others. So it isn't a knowing of just thoughts and prayers, because for me, when someone says, I send you my thoughts and prayers, I will always accept that. But it is, to me, more about action and embodied living. It is about integrating the thought. It is integrating the teaching. So the difference in the positive thinking movement and the knowingness is that there is a truth and a conviction and a deep trust and a certainty that as we think and we feel and we know, that we can trust that something is unfolding beyond what the current condition is. It isn't positive thinking alone. I always know that I'm aligned by how I feel. Your feelings are your guide into whether you are in fear or you are in love, and there is a difference. You know the difference. So what is the point then of entertaining what you do not want to see? Your job, my job, is not to focus there. Your job is to continue to trust and to know the truth without wavering. It is that wavering faith, praying without ceasing. Your job is to know that God has got the details worked out, that God is in the details. It is all guiding your path, and your job is to get out of your own way and the limited thinking and to knowing that something bigger wants to happen for your life all the time. This is the heart of a practitioner. You are all, whether credentials or otherwise, you are all practitioners of this science and of this teaching and of this philosophy. And so we operate then under the knowing that God is all there is, that it is the only activity, it is the only thing that is happening right now. And we know that we are inextricably connected to it and unified with it. This is the oneness that we are always talking about. And then the realization in our prayer work is where we get to practice the knowing without a doubt, despite the conditions that might be happening in someone else's life or in your life, despite fear or scarcity or limitation or death or loss or lack or whatever the condition is, we affirm what we want to see. So we keep our attention on where we want to go, knowing that despite the appearances, wholeness is. Some people criticize this, as I said before, and they say, well, this is not reality. I can see how bad it is in the world. I can see what the news says, and I can see that it's not going to work. And this, my friends, is not the supportive or the productive use of the law. It's not about wishful thinking. I have had countless experiences of this, of knowing my truth and the truth, despite what other people thought of me, against all odds, despite what other people may have thought or didn't understand. There was something within me that just knew. It was like this intuitive inner prompting. It was a knowing, it was a trusting, and it is a trusting of yourself. I think that what sets some of us apart from others who are, say, highly successful, highly abundant enjoy all the time, who are doing similar things as we are, is that they have got the trusting life part down. There is this deep certainty in so many successful people that I know that they know that everything is working out, even when it seems like it's falling apart. That is that faith muscle that we get to develop every single day. And when we are unable to, we call someone who can know it for and with us. I know personally, and many of you on this call can probably say that this teaching has saved so many lives because of the shift in thinking. So when I think about my own business, my own life, I was reminded this past week by a dear friend of mine, because I was pondering, I was like, how do entrepreneurs build something when, obviously unexpected things come at us all the time and things fall apart and they don't always work out the way that we want? How do we continue to hold the vision for what's possible? And he reminded me, he said, Savanna, some of the biggest corporations started off in extremely humble circumstances. We know that Microsoft started off in Bill Gates' parents' garage. We know that Facebook started in a dorm room. Amazon started off as an online bookstore, and it took over a year to sell a single book. The Mattel toy company started out selling dollhouses for years before creating the Barbie doll. So the vision was already within these entrepreneurs. And it didn't mean that they didn't have setbacks, but it meant that there was some sort of trust beyond the actual appearance of what was going on, that they were going to make it. So we continue to know the truth beyond our current situation, despite what you're going through right now. It's what Howard Thurman talks about when he says to keep fresh before us the moments of our highest resolve. You must envision and, most importantly, feel into what you need and want and desire, and you will surprise yourself to see how easy it is to manifest. Because if all you're ever focusing on is the condition, what do we know about that? We know that what you focus on expands, right? And what you resist persists. I want to tell you this interesting story that came to me recently. I was at Mile High Church in Denver, Colorado. It's where I did all my ministerial training. And this was probably, I want to say 10 years ago. And I was doing this mock panel to basically go through what you do when you not candidate, but you interview to see if you're ready to become a minister. It was when I was going to get my license. And they set up this mock panel with some ministers from the community. And there was this one person, and I swear to you, there's always one. There was this one person on the panel who I knew had a history of what felt like purposely trying to trip people up. He was a lawyer, and he was very interested in just picking. And I knew also from the history of our connection that there was some underlying stuff going on with some power dynamics that he had with women. So during my interview, I recall him questioning my purpose and my passion for ministry, this vision that I had laid out, because they say, well, what is your vision for your ministry? And now, mind you, what I was sharing with them at the time was not popular opinion. This was back in 2013. Okay. So what I had told them was, I want to create an online platform reaching thousands of people all over the world. My ministry is a ministry without walls. There is no brick and mortar church. I spoke about diversity of language and culture and people, and that I could do it from anywhere in the world. And the theme that kept coming at that time and on this panel was that online ministry is not real ministry. So at one point, I asked him directly, because I got so bold, if he was questioning my purpose to intentionally try tripping me up. And I expressed that I felt that it was really not the best method of questioning. And I can remember my eyes started to tear up. I felt that my consciousness was being questioned, but even more so, he couldn't see the vision that I was seeing. And so after that experience, I walked away from the panel, and it really shook me up, and I felt horrible. I was worried that I wasn't going to pass the real panel. But what I learned from that experience is that we do not have to get others to see our vision if we see our vision. It's not my job to convince anyone that my vision is enough or that my ministry is even enough. My job and your job is to continue demonstrating the truth despite the appearance, despite what other people have to say. It's the same for all of us, right? So it is our job to continue holding the high watch for the vision that we have, called into our lives, for the vision that is on our heart. The irony to me now is that 2020 came. It opened the curtains to me not shying away from an online platform. It was like, well, Savanna, you have absolutely zero excuses now to create that online platform. And now everyone can see that online ministry is absolutely possible and actually essential and necessary, because many of our communities would not have survived without it. So online ministry is where it's at now. We wouldn't have been able to provide our services had we not leaned into our technology, and people laughed at that idea years ago. So the lesson then to me and everyone is that we have to trust the vision that has been placed on our hearts. We have to know the truth despite what is appearing in the world of effect, despite the financial situation, despite what the past might have brought, despite what used to be. Whatever it is that you are going through right now in your life, whatever you're experiencing right now, you have to continually and constantly envision and feel into what you want to see. It's not giving any attention to the limitations or the lack. And of course, this isn't easy because we're bombarded all the time with limitations and self-doubt. That is why it is a practice. Another example of this that I can remember was years ago. It had to have been, I want to say, almost 20 years ago now. I was boarding a flight from JFK to Kyiv, Ukraine, because I was doing some Science of Mind community work there. And the entire flight was overbooked. And I had already flown from Denver to JFK, and there were 0 spots on this plane. I was on standby. I was flying standby with this buddy pass. And because it was overbooked, the odds of me actually getting on that plane were very slim. And they told me this throughout the entire way. They're like, we don't actually think you're going to get on this flight. The challenge I was having was time, because I had a Science of Mind conference that I had to get to. And it was a huge ordeal because it was leading to this entire delegation of Americans coming over to the Black Sea. I had to get on an overnight train for 17 hours, and I could not miss this train, or I would have had to travel alone, and I was going to be a day late. Everything would have been thrown off. So the odds and the facts presented to me of me not making that plane, they were very slim in all appearances. And I remember standing at the podium just waiting for them to call my name. And I kept saying my affirmations over and over again. I kept envisioning myself getting on that plane. And there was even a standby list that I was on where there were 3 people ahead of me. And I was like, oh man, I have to get on this plane. I am getting on this plane. So the anticipation of, am I going to get on this flight? It's late. If I don't make this, how am I going to navigate New York City by myself? I was 20 years old, unsure what the heck I'm doing. But I continue to see the outcome. I'm getting on that plane. My mom calls me and I'm like, Mom, I'm getting on this plane. The entire flight boarded. At the 11th hour, they called my name. I got the very last seat because someone had to step off the plane for whatever reason. And it was literally in the front row. Last person on, first person off. Yeah, I'm sure many of you have had an experience like this. You have had to, right? We do this when we treat for perfect healing and wholeness for a health challenge. We do this when a situation with a sibling or a family member or a friend is on the rocks or estranged. We envision what we want to see, how we want the outcome to turn out. What is it, if you were to think for a moment, what is it that you wish to see and experience more of in your life? If money and resources and time and age, fill in the blank, were no obstacle, what would you be doing? What would you see and envision for your life? This work, as I said before, it starts in consciousness. And so while I know you know this already, it's always good to remind ourselves of our faith, that our faith in something greater. There's something greater that is operating. I was meant to get on that plane and everything worked out beautifully. It was the first delegation I had ever been on in the country of Ukraine. And I went back 7 times over a span of 11 years. That was I would say the cornerstone. It was like the moment where everything just blossomed and unfolded for me. I think that this thing right here, our faith in something greater, is what sets us apart from the status quo or from mediocrity, from victim consciousness. It doesn't serve us to continue looking at the condition and making ourselves crazy and in fear and miserable and suffering. So on an individual level, we get to do our consciousness work. We get to really take up more space. My commitment this year for 2022 is to take up more space, is to act more boldly, is to being fully available to my vision and my dream, to take up space for the vision that is living inside of your heart. The pandemic has definitely created a lot of fear and division. It's brought us back to what we know as Kingdom One consciousness, is that victim survival consciousness time and time again. It's where we're in the belly of the whale of the heroine or the hero's journey, where we're being faced with trials and tribulations of the heroine's journey. And then sometimes we go back to sleep and we forget what we know deeply within ourselves. We get off track with our humanness. So what I really want you to grasp from this talk, other than all of the little gems here, is that we must trust the process. Whatever it is that's happening in your life right now, it is about deeply trusting the process of your vision and getting clearer and clearer on the outcome that you want to see. The vision that is like pulling you along. Staying lined with those values until we watch it miraculously unfold before our eyes. So staying true to the vision despite what you might be afraid of. Because fear, of course, is normal. It's what we do with that energy of that fear that makes a world of difference. So with that, I want to invite you into a prayer now. So just taking a moment, closing the eyes, taking a breath, tapping into that vision of what it is that is truly on your heart right now. What is the thing that won't leave you alone? That passion or that purpose that maybe has been put off on the bedside or on the back burner? It's that thing that you really, really would love to be doing or you would love to do, but there's something in the way of it. I want you to just bring it into your heart right now. And I want you to examine how you feel when you think about the possibility of that. What does it spark and light up within you? Is it opportunity? Is it peacefulness? Is it excitement? Is it joy? Is it unconditional love? Like, what is that feeling? And just really feel into that. Or maybe it's success or abundance or beauty. See, that is the feeling that we get to come back to. And so what I'm knowing for each and every one of us is that we are guided to trust the process and to trust ourselves deeper, to come back to the truth of our wholeness and our perfection, that everything truly is working together for good when we turn away from the world of effect and back to the truth of what we wish to see. And so I declare it and know it for each and every one of us, that we are being pulled by something far greater than this egoic mind wants to tell us. We step away from our fear, any sense of separation, and we come back to this realization of opportunity, that everything is being perfectly aligned, that everything is guided, that we are being directed in every moment. And so with that awareness and with that truth, I give thanks and gratitude. I give gratitude for the vision and the passion and the purpose that has been planted in all of our hearts on this call. And I know that it is unfolding beautifully. It is perfect. It is miraculously unfolding as we get out of our own way. And so with that, I release it now into the activation of love itself. I know all is truly well. And just say to yourself, Ashe. And so it is. Amen.
Standing here in your presence, in a grace so relentless, I am one by perfect love, wrapped within the arms of heaven, in a peace that lasts forever, sinking deep in mercy. See, I'm wide awake, drawing close, stirred by grace, and all my heart is yours. All fear removed, I breathe you in, I lean into your love. Oh, your love so deep, it washes over me. Your grace is all I see. I give my everything. Love so deep, it washes over me. Your grace is all I see. I give my everything. Love so deep, it washes over me. I give my everything. Love so deep, it washes over me. Your grace is all I see. I give my everything. Love.
And let us just take a deep breath together. Take an inhale. And we exhale. Let's do that again. Take an inhale. And an exhale. Bringing our full attention to the power and the presence of this moment. For I know that right where we are is the power and the love and the wisdom of pure spirit, of life, of intelligence, of beauty, of power. And so we just let ourselves release all that has come before this moment, everything that happened during our day. Just letting go and bringing ourselves fully present to our breath, to our hearts, to the center of our beingness. This is the stillness practice that we remind ourselves of and continually come back to. It is that I am presence that we remember we are part of. It is who and whose we are. And so as we breathe during this meditation, we just let anything go that feels stressful or anxious. Any sense of the distractions that might be present, any sense of fear, any sense of separation, we let it go. And we pull our attention to this present moment, which is filled with peace and grace and love and joy and truth. And we just bask in it. knowing that we can come back to all of that busyness, but for this moment, we just breathe. We recognize the stillness and that the presence is palpable to us when we listen. And so I'll give us just a few moments to be in the silence. And when you hear the sound of my voice, that is when we will come back to the space of this Zoom room. So whatever the thought, whatever the situation, peace be still. Whatever the next step, whatever the fear or concern, peace be still. Whatever the decision is or the circumstance, peace be still. And so we just take that holy breath and we give gratitude for the ability to just be in the pause, be in the stillness, be in the presence, which is never, ever, ever an absence. And so I give gratitude. I give gratitude for each and every one of us on this call, knowing that we get exactly what we need today, exactly what is needed to be heard, to be known, perhaps to be transformed through. And so I let it be. And so it is. Amen. You may open your eyes when you're ready.